A fun day Saturday morning with my special guest. Oh, yeah, she is just wonderful. Megan, how are you this morning?
I'm doing great. How are you, Bobo?
Oh, just peachy keen. I tell you, just got my first cup of coffee, believe it or not, and it just tastes so good, you know? So listen.
Oh, yeah. I love that first cup.
Oh, I do too. And everybody be quiet while I drink it, please. So, what's your contact information for end-of-life plans?
Sure. So you can reach me, Megan Conroy, at 845-291-0011. You can find me on my website at www.midhudsonlaw.com.
And we want to make sure that everybody knows that you're a partner in the same firm with Richard Shapiro.
What we do in our formal maintenance or updating program is meet with the clients every year. That's really the best way that we find they can make sure that their documents are as up to date as possible. We never know when someone is going to encounter a disability or pass away, so we want to try to stay on top of things. But for the people that don't want to enroll in a formal maintenance program, because it's not obligated, right? So for those people, I would say you should at least think about your estate plan each year. Pick a time of year that you're going to remember to do it. Maybe it's your birthday, maybe it's tax season. Pick a time, and as you're going through your paperwork, just mentally review the plan. Does it still meet your needs? Are all of the right people in the right places? If they are, I would say they probably can safely continue on, assuming they're healthy. They can continue on without needing to update. But I would say really they should consider updating every 3 to 5 years just to get the benefit of new techniques and language that the attorney might be able to provide.
And, you know, unfortunately, none of us have a crystal ball. A person that has the last will and testament and a trust, and they pass away unexpectedly, that is the problem right there. Because if they wanted to change things, obviously, they're not going to be able to do that.
Right. After you're gone, it's going to be too late. And gone can mean that you've passed away, but it also can mean that you've become incapacitated, right? You can't come up with the ideas or convey those ideas to your attorney in a way that would lend itself to making any changes to the document. So we really want to be very careful and mindful of our own health. And like you said, we don't have a crystal ball. So the best we can do is just keep the estate plan in the back of our mind. If we think of a change that we need to make, maybe make that appointment at that point. Make sure you're getting in to see the attorney because you don't know if you're going to be able to make that or push it down the road, make that in the future.
Absolutely. So if you have a real nice home and it's paid off, you have no mortgage, you have a nice car parked in the driveway and lots of assets there, and you just unfortunately just pass away or, like you said, become incapacitated to be able to make decisions, what happens then?
Well, it's really going to depend on the kind of planning that you have in place, right? So for our clients who've done all of the comprehensive planning that's necessary, if they lose capacity, I'm going to assume because they've done that planning that they have a really good power of attorney in place. And that power of attorney is a document where they have appointed an agent, one or more people that they trust, absolutely trust. And those agents, now that they've been appointed in the power of attorney, can manage the assets for the incapacitated individual. If they don't have that power of attorney in place, they don't have proper planning in place, then their loved ones really need to petition the court for something called a guardianship proceeding. And that's where the court reviews the person's assets, determines that they are truly incapacitated, unable to make decisions for themselves, and then they will appoint an appropriate individual who can manage that person's assets for them. But a guardianship proceeding is something that is pretty invasive. The court really needs to explore all of the facets of the individual's life. And then from there, it's probably pretty expensive because it's going to take some time and there's a lot of attorneys involved to represent the person who's petitioning and the incapacitated person. So we're really dealing a lot with the court without proper planning. So the power of attorney is important for incapacity. And then what we also want to see is if they passed away having all of those assets, again, that they have good planning documents in place. If they have a trust, we want to make sure those assets are connected to the trust. If they don't have a trust, those assets would fall to their will, and the will would have to be probated. Again, it would go through a court proceeding in order to be validated, have an executor appointed, and the executor can then collect and distribute those assets.
That could really take some time, couldn't it, Megan?
It can. So what we do typically find in our area is that a probate proceeding will take about a year. Now, that doesn't mean that it's a year with nothing happening. There's a lot of things that happen, but it takes some weeks for the paperwork to be prepared in order to be submitted to the court for review. And then from there, our courts are very busy, so they could take a number of weeks. What we typically find is 2 to 3 months before the court will be able to appoint an executor. And that's assuming there are no family complications. There's no one contesting, there are no issues. Everything is running very smoothly. So we see now that it's been about 3 to 4 months just to get the executor appointed. And then from there, the executor has a job to do. They have a lot of legwork, a lot of paperwork that they need to take care of. So your beneficiaries are not receiving the assets for a number of months after the executor has been appointed. Typically, we advise the executor to wait 7 months before they distribute any assets because creditors can stake a claim on the estate as well. And they have a 7-month period to come in and say, wait a minute, Megan owed me some money. She has an unpaid credit card bill or a hospital bill, or she received government benefits while she was alive, and we want to recover that. So it typically takes about a year from start to finish in a very, very smooth probate estate.
Now, I know someone, and I've known them since 1958, and I still know them today. And it's really nice to have great friends. But the father passed away, and the one daughter had a lot of problems because he leased a vehicle. And I won't say from what company because that doesn't matter. But he leased a vehicle, and they needed all kinds of proof that he passed away. And she went through a whole rigmarole here when it came down to returning that vehicle, right?
Sure, yeah. It's going to depend very much on the kind of asset that's being dealt with. But when you have an asset that is connected to another institution, right? This was a leased vehicle. It's not something that the decedent owned in any fashion. Now we have to work with the dealership, the lender, all these people who need the requisite paperwork to be able to see that this individual has now passed away. And that's not sufficient in and of itself. They need to know who has authority to manage that person's belongings now that they're gone. So generally, you will find that there's a lot more paperwork involved when we need to deal with financial institutions or car dealerships or things like that. So having good estate planning documents in place is necessary. It's really important. But even then, even with that documentation in place, there is still work to be done.
Oh, sure. And, you know, the other thing that she had a problem with is that the township where I lived, I mean, their house was right next door to mine, but they changed the zoning codes for the homes where the chimney had to be raised another 8 inches above the peak of the house. And she had to go through that too before she could even put the house on the market. So zoning codes have a lot to do with this too when it comes down to a person passing away, such as your dad or mom or whatever the case may be, and you're the executor of the last will and testament. You have to also be in touch with the zoning codes of the township where you live. Isn't that true, Megan?
Sure. I would say that typically an individual is going to want to rely on legal counsel to help guide them through each of these things, right? Because not every person is going to stay up to date on what's happening with the zoning laws and the changes that are happening therein. But you're absolutely right. Your point is that when you serve in a role such as an executor, or you have a loved one that passes away, you can suddenly be exposed to all different facets of the law. So not just estate laws, right, but now zoning laws as well. And it's going to be something that may be difficult to navigate through. You're dealing with things you probably have never dealt with before. So again, consulting with a good attorney can help guide you through that. But absolutely, after someone passes away, it inevitably ends up being that there are stones that are turned over now and things that we never thought we would have been dealing with are exposed, and it's becoming a problem that we now need to address because the deceased individual either didn't have time to address it during lifetime or didn't know it was going to be a problem down the road. So I would say expect the unexpected, even in the well-laid estate plan.
So when you look at something like that, zoning codes and everything that goes together with the assets, like the leased automobile, the house, different zoning codes, and of course, we're looking at wanting to get rid of the home itself. It can be extremely stressful, right, Megan?
Yes, absolutely. It is something that can be stressful, overwhelming. We have everyday people, right? They're from all different walks of life, all different professions. Chances are they're probably very smart in their own right. But when you don't deal in these kinds of things on a daily basis, now you're exposed to something new you're not familiar with. That is something that can be taxing on the individual. So when you're selecting your executor, your trustee, your helper, you want to take that into consideration. You want to think about the person who is up to the task, right? And it might be difficult. You might be asking them to do a really big job. So it's someone that you acknowledge that you may be putting a little bit of a burden on them. You know, even when you don't have these zoning issues or issues with a lease, there's things to be done. And so they're going to be expected to do a job. So to your point, I think we really want to be careful in who we select to make sure that they're up to the task, that they have a good head about them, right? They won't crumble under pressure, and they're not afraid to pick up the phone, ask for help, ask questions, contact the attorney, the financial institutions. We need someone who's willing to do the job. And so when we do our estate plans with our clients, we try to prompt them through those kinds of difficult thoughts. You know, the person who's going to be doing this is going to be sad that you passed away, and they're going to have a lot of paperwork to do, and they're going to be exposed to things that maybe they've never had to deal with before. You know, so are you selecting the right person? And then from there, we want to make sure that we have successors named. We always want to have a backup executor, a backup trustee, because even if the first person that you picked is wonderful and they're really good and you know they'd be perfect for the job, you don't know what they are going to be going through in their life at the time this happened. It could happen 30 years from now, and they could be much older and really not up to the task anymore. So that's a really integral part of the planning process, is choosing the right people.
But like you said earlier in our conversation, that a lot of times this could take months to get through. And then, especially having an asset like a home, taxes have to be paid as well, correct?
Sure, yeah. For assets that might have ongoing expenses associated with them, and especially if there's some delay, we're waiting to sell it, or we don't even plan to sell it. We want to keep it so we can pass it to the beneficiaries. There are expenses associated with maintaining real estate and other kinds of assets. Typically, those expenses are going to be paid for by the estate in a well-laid estate plan. So like trust planning, for instance, really lends itself to having available funds to be able to pay for those ongoing expenses, but not always. And so sometimes the person that you choose will kindly front some of those expenses and be reimbursed later. But then sometimes there's just not enough money to go around, and we need to figure out what we can do with these assets before there are things like liens and back taxes owed.
Well, you know, the interesting thing, too, is that if you're looking at a home of the deceased and you have those back taxes that need to be paid, and you can't sell the house until those back taxes are paid, in other words, you have a lien on the property, you could always have an estate sale, meaning that you would sell things in the house in order to collect more monies. But when you have an estate sale, all those things have to be appraised, do they not, by a company?
That's right. So we typically, again, rely on a professional like a company who does this kind of appraisal and this kind of sale, like an estate sale, and we defer to them to come in, review what contents of the home is what we're kind of talking about now,
right.
And see what's collectible, what's valuable, what can be sold for any amount of money, right? So they're going to give us some idea of what these items are worth and whether or not it makes sense to proceed with a full estate sale, or maybe just sell a couple of items and everything else maybe can be donated or distributed amongst family members, things like that. But when we're looking for liquidity, you're right, we may have to resort to selling contents of home, especially if there's some value there.
And especially the people, or I should say, better yet, the professionals that estimate everything. I mean, they get a percentage too, or do they just get an outright fee?
Well, I think it's really going to depend on the company that you're dealing with. They probably all will come up with different fee structures. And so, you know, and I think to some extent it's going to depend on what is actually included as part of the contents of the home. So that is something that they would discuss with the executor or the trustee. And that executor or trustee maybe wants to interview a few different companies to see what the fees are, how they compare. Because when you're serving as an executor or a trustee, you really have a fiduciary responsibility to do what's in the best interest of the beneficiaries. So you have to be careful not to pay too much in fees, right? If you could have found another company that's reasonable or more reasonable in their local and they can do as good of a job, you as the executor, you as the trustee should try to select that lower cost company, again, as long as they're still going to do a good job.
Right now, as our listeners listen to us, I mean, all of this just sounds so complicated. That's why we need to go to a good attorney like you, believe me, because this could be overbearing on one's mind, yes?
Sure. Like I said, and you've acknowledged, it is a lot of work. And it's difficult to serve in the position of an executor or trustee, and you're really going to want to rely on your professional help. Certainly the attorney is going to guide you, right? But then you have real estate professionals like your realtor that helps you get the best price for the house. And you have the companies that help you with the estate sale, and you're going to want to confer with an accountant for tax advice and maybe even financial advisors for management of assets until they're distributed. So there are a lot of resources that are available to people like the executor or the trustee who are serving in that role. They just need to know to ask for that kind of help. They don't have to instinctively know how to do these things because, like you said, they're just going to be worn out and overwhelmed before it really gets off the ground if they try to do it by themselves.
Absolutely. That's why for our listeners that are listening to this, if you feel like you have a last will and testament in place and you have a trust going on, that's why it's very, very important that you make sure that you have all your I's dotted and your T's crossed, because you just never know what can happen. And the person that you have in place, you might want to rethink that. Correct, Megan?
That's right. So the biggest thing that you can do, like you just said, is make sure that your plan is what you want it to be, right? It says the things that you want to happen. It's as updated as possible. It's a good, solid plan because the executor and the trustee will have a lot of work to do no matter what. So you don't want to add the burden of having a sloppy estate plan or an outdated estate plan onto them. You want to make sure it's completely updated and ready to go, making their job a lot easier.
Yeah, because like I said, this could be overbearing on the executor. Believe me, it really could be. So we need to review our trust plan and our last will and testament about how often?
I say think about it every single year, at least mentally, even if you don't visit with the attorney. But you should try to make an appointment with an attorney every 3 to 5 years would be a good range for updating, actually making changes to the estate plan.
And like I said earlier too, Megan, nobody has a crystal ball, and we never know what could happen. So always expect the unexpected. Isn't that correct?
That's right. That is a good rule of thumb.
Yeah. So, everybody has to really buckle down, think about this, even though a lot of people don't want to think about it. And I can't blame them for not wanting to think about this. But it is a fact of life that you have to have your plan in place. And it's very, very important that you do that because personally, I know like I said earlier in our conversation, about a girl that lived next door to me, and we were growing up. We were playmates since 1958, but she never expected her father to leave this earth in the condition that he left things in, with such as a car leasing, ever so changing zone codes in the township, and having to do this, that, and the other thing, and having to find a person that can rebuild the chimney on the house, even though that sounds simple. But these things do take place, and these things you need to make sure of.
That's right. And so updating your estate plan, like we said, that helps to take the burden off of your loved ones. We can't get around everything. Like you said, you have to expect the unexpected. There will be things that come up, but the least that you can do is make sure that you have a plan in place. The plan is as updated as possible, and that's one less thing for your loved ones to have to worry about as they're going through the grief of your passing and handling your affairs.
Right. And, you know, something else, too, that we didn't mention. I mean, if the individual passes away and he or she's spouse is still alive, that's a burden on them, too, is it not, or isn't it?
I mean, sure, it's going to be difficult on everyone that they leave behind, and then certainly the condition of the spouse at the time the individual passes away, right? So if things go the way we think they should go, when a person passes away, they're going to be much older, and presumably, if they're married, their spouse will be older as well. So these kinds of tasks are harder to deal with as you get older, right? You might not be able to get around as well as you could have in your younger years. You might not be as willing or as capable to make the phone calls or do the paperwork that's required to settle the estate. So it certainly can be something that's more difficult on a spouse. They've lost their loved one, right? Their one and only, presumably. But on top of that, there's a lot of paperwork, and the condition of the spouse is going to determine whether they're really up to that task or they're not.
And especially if there's no children and there's only the married couple and one passes away, that's a big burden for the survivor to deal with. It's huge.
Sure. It becomes a lot harder when you don't have a network of support, right? People who are able to help you, younger people who are able to step in and assist where you need it. People are generally, as you pointed out, relying on their adult children for that kind of assistance, but not everyone has adult children to rely on. So now they're looking to maybe friends of the family, a little bit more distant relatives, nieces, nephews, things of that nature. And to expect that from friends or nieces and nephews, that kind of assistance, that's a lot to ask as well. So having a plan in place forces you to think about those situations in advance of it happening so that you can start to talk to those people and say, you know, we don't have anyone else and we know it's a big ask, but would you be willing to help out if something were to happen to me? I don't want to leave that on my husband or my wife all by themselves. So you can start to make arrangements ahead of time.
Oh, absolutely. Megan, how do our listeners get in touch with your firm, please?
Sure. So they can call us at Blustein, Shapiro, Frank, and Barone. The phone number there is 845-291-0011. We also have a really great website. It's midhudsonlaw.com. You can find all kinds of workshops that you can sign up for on the website. You can see my picture and get a hold of me directly through there.
Is it a good picture, Megan?
It's a little outdated, but I still like it.
No, that's funny. I know a lot of women always, look at their picture and say, I don't like that. I don't like this. But you're saying it's a little outdated?
It's a little outdated. My hair is much shorter in the photo than it is right now, but I still look pretty much the same, which I'm thankful for.
Yeah, age really does play a trip on us, doesn't it, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Megan, I think you're absolutely wonderful. You have a terrific firm that you're partners with, and you do have workshops, too, which I think is just absolutely great. Do you have one coming up soon?
I do. I actually have one coming up in April. It's going to be on April 10th. Our workshops are all in person at our Goshen office, and they start at 3 o'clock. So if anyone wants to sign up for those, they can call us at the firm, or they can go on the website and sign up there.
I urge our listeners to sign up for that workshop because it's free, but seating is very limited, correct?
That's right. It's very limited. So if there's no more availability left in that April 10th workshop, we do have one on June 24th as well. And I'm going to run those every other month throughout the year. So while seating is limited and people should try to reserve their spots right away, I am going to try to make sure that there are always some workshops scheduled free to the public.
What a great firm that you work for. Let me tell you, it is just wonderful. If you would, one more time, how do we get in touch with you, Megan?
Sure. You can call me at 845-291-0011 or on our website at midhudsonlaw.com.
Megan, I think you're wonderful. I really enjoyed our little gathering here this morning with Planning Ahead, and I look forward to our next meeting.
Thank you. Same here.
Okay, Megan. All right, that's all the time we have for right now. And, of course, I'm Bobo. We're getting back to more of the greatest music ever recorded on Fox Oldies 98.9 WGNY FM.